Hey, everybody. I wanted to try a different form of media to talk to you all and get to know you guys and talk about certain things that have come up in session with clients and certain things that I'm struggling with and certain things that clients are struggling with. And I think bringing this kind of element of community to the topic of food and our relationship with our bodies and how we feel, body image wise, and like how our bodies change, and just kind of like being a little bit more open about that and like developing strategies around that together as a community reinforces this whole concept of soul hunger, which essentially is that we are the authority together of our collectively of what we want to achieve and also of our own bodies. And doesn't mean we don't need to support and we don't need experts and guidance and like getting clear on what our body signals are even telling us and getting outward support for that too, because I think that's it can be muddling in our own heads to understand and self-diagnose, right? So I think it's helpful to get support, but I think you have to be the piece, the puzzle piecer. You have to put together the pieces of the puzzle for yourself, right? And so I think in soul hunger, I just think that it's necessary that we experiment, right? And we start to really get clear on what is real for me today, versus what is actually happening from a physical and emotional safety piece as well. We talk a lot in Soul Hunger about our story, and we talk about how we protect ourselves from this bigger risk. And a lot of the times, this shows up in very all or nothing ways, like with our food. And I think a large part of like the intuitive eating and movement world, and like just kind of opening up the doors for other philosophies around food and how we relate to, yeah, how we diet, so to speak, or how we intake certain things or treat ourselves or whatnot, right? Treat our bodies, like not like treat ourselves as in like we're treating ourselves, but how we care for ourselves is often this misconception is like that we are totally responsible for our own selves, when like accessibility and other factors obviously really contribute, right? And so we have these bigger systems, and in Soul Hunger we talk about these as our as or this as our socialization, which is essentially things that we've learned from our parents, school, teachers, friends, peers, yeah, like media, all this stuff, right? And we start to internalize those ways of relating to being healthy or unhealthy as it relates to diet culture, or being good or bad, right? Being on track or off track. And essentially, we go into these protective modes when we feel a threat, right? And oftentimes, when we feel an emotional threat, we're going to protect ourselves. And this shows up with food. And we talk about this in Soul Hunger a lot. We talk about how food is about safety, and oftentimes it can be very symbolic and very physical and metaphorical, and why we turn to food and why we avoid exercise and why we protect ourselves in these ways, and we have these strategies. And we start to really have these narrow definitions of what it means to be healthy, right? And that's like something I've found too with clients and myself, is that I'm like talking about this, I'm like, oh, we have these narrow definitions. You're like, yeah. But then we oftentimes don't even realize that. And in Soul Hunger, we talk about these as our inner protectors. They come in and they like run the show, and we don't even know. And we sometimes don't even realize that these values that we've had are not even what we really truly want ourselves, right? So, and this was apparent for me, and I did a post this week, but talking about just talking about like being in like two-piece or like a bikini and having like some stomach showing, and how that would never, I would never want to do that. But I thought I wanted to do that so much just because other people around me when I was growing up and stuff were doing it, and I was perceived them as, popular and in the in crowd. When now that I'm realizing that, like, oh, this is my body, my how I feel safe and comfortable, and how I feel showing up is what is the right amount for me, right? And it's not a bikini, I don't know if I ever want that, and I still want to accept and feel comfortable, right? So it's just interesting thinking about a lot of the times these values that we've kind of adopted aren't truly necessarily what we truly want for ourselves, and it just kind of skews our whole process as it relates to getting healthier. And yeah, maybe that is getting some sort of change in our body, but I think the important thing is developing an awareness and an understanding as to why you want that change. We often talk in Soul Hunger as this is our why, right? Why do you want change? Like, what's that about? What's how's that going to help you? But then oftentimes there's this protective response, right? And it's like, oh, I really want that thing, but I'm not actually following through. These steps aren't happening, right? And it can even be pretty clear cut and it still doesn't happen. And so these are really protective outputs, like procrastination. That's why hacking sometimes doesn't work, because it's just protective. It's a protective output. So in Soul Hunger, we talk about this. We talk about change, and we talk about how we as adults change and how we can start to develop these new narratives, but pathways as well, neurologically. And we really start to understand that it is a lot about safety. It's like not how safe we feel, but how safe we feel in ourselves, so that we can show up and take the risks we need to like build that sense of confidence and fulfillment that we think weight loss might give us, right? So we start to decenter it, but for our benefit, if that makes sense. But one of the resources in certification, we were talking about this book by William Bridges called Managing Transitions. And I thought it was fascinating. My coach, Ali, was talking about how it's not, how William says it's not the change that does us in, it's the transitions. And so as we navigate life, it's interesting to think about our bodies will change as we go through as females go through that transition, their menopause, their bodies will change, right? And oftentimes the death of a loved one, or getting diagnosed with like an illness, or having an illness over time that you didn't have before, like developing some gastro issues as I was going through my weight loss process. And still from time to time, it's like, how do I manage that? What does that look like, right? It's still like using the tools that we build upon in Soul Hunger, but understanding that like it's really hard to manage these transitions, and essentially life is a bunch of transitions as we go through, because if we're not feeling that sense of groundedness and centeredness that we need to feel safe. Because ultimately that transition, like the death of a loved one, or getting diagnosed that with an illness, or gaining weight or losing weight, or feeling like this friction, is essentially a loss of identity and self trust, and it can be very it can really shake us, right? And so in Soul Hunger, we work on those, like adapting into that, so that these transitions can be navigated through effectively, so that you can feel safe as you are transitioning into that new identity, if that makes sense. So for example, for me, I ultimately knew that when I was at my throes of my all or nothing and being really extreme with exercise and hurting myself, feeling so in pain, I knew that weight loss or losing any more weight at that time, even though that was still a goal at the time for me, that was always my goal. So it's another it's another topic for another day, right? When that's always our goal, that can be unhealthy as well, right? But I think it's like, and changing those metrics is super important. But I think that I ultimately knew that losing weight wouldn't really change my pain, right? And so I put a lot before understanding my own soul, my own needs, and finding that truce with food and exercise. Is like, I did not know what my body needed, but I knew that being in pain weight loss wouldn't solve that per se, right? And I had put so much emotional bandwidth on weight loss solving all those difficulties and those deep like painful issues that I was having with myself on an emotional level and in my story, but also in on a physical level with my pain and stuff, right? And so I put all of this metaphorical and physical weight on my weight. And so it's just interesting how that didn't shift until, like I said, really in getting clear on our own values and how we want to define exercise and how we want to, what foods do work for us and how we want to feel in a larger, holistic, like bigger level. It can be very complex to navigate. So if we don't feel supported in these transitions and feel that we're rooting into a different sense of safety versus our old sense of safety that we're kind of being almost tested with through life or through our own volition, right? In Soul Hunger, we actually go at this with intention, but we try and we just build the skills so that these transitions don't shake us, and we can actually get to that other side of, I'm at a loss, stage 1, and then I'm in that neutral zone where I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. I feel like sometimes I'm getting some places, but then I fall back, and it's just very, very circular, very circular. So if we don't feel supported in those transitions, in that neutral zone of that change process, we will never get to the other side of feeling at ease and confident and truly, when we build these self-authoring tools that we do, and we really cultivate that together as a group authority and together in our own way, food really does fall into place a bit. I'm not saying it's an easy process, but it definitely gets more simple, and we definitely feel more sense of fulfillment and more sense of, I know that I have my own back here in this whole bigger picture, in this bigger transition of what essentially is life, right? And so yeah, I just wanted to share that, as far as like, we think it's the change or the habit maybe that we might need to tackle or break, but essentially it's like not feeling supported with what we truly know for ourselves in those transitions that do us in and that don't get us to actually where we want to go. And so that metaphorical break that we talk about being very protective, binge eating, we are staying up past our proposed bedtime to get that good solid rejuvenating rest. We don't choose things that replenish us. Sometimes we punish ourselves with food. Sometimes we don't eat when we're feeling anxious or stressed, right? These are all ways that we protect and avoid or compete with ourselves or accommodate others just to feed into that identity, essentially, that we shift and change and manage and work on in Soul Hunger. So we really collaborate with our bodies, right? And so it's just so cool to see in clients that once we really root into these transitions, our story becomes less active and food becomes a lot more simple. And yeah, it's just such a wild ride. So I think, just as a takeaway, if you're still listening, thank you for listening. But I think really building awareness around these these transitions, and just being understanding of, yeah, your body can change. Life is going to happen. There's going to be real threat, real risk, and there's perceived risk too that happens as a result of feeling that threat or feeling triggered and unsafe, and feeling all those, we call it in Soul Hunger, tail emotions, right? Tired, anxious, inadequate, and lonely. All these things can stir up a bunch of stuff in us, right? So if we're not rooted, and if we're not knowing what we need, that, yeah, it's going to be really hard to really change in that deeper, more holistic way. That really is the only the only way we're actually going to make things stick consistently, is that if we think about all of these things, right? Not just what we're eating or how we're thinking. It's, we oftentimes need to think our way into new ways of feeling, right? So we need to actually experience new things and feel new things ourselves, and have it be meaningful to us. And if we don't know what those things are in these rocky transitions and stress and overwhelm, then we won't be able to actually make that transition and change for the long haul, right? Because oftentimes they say too that, I'm not sure the exact amount, but 82%, don't quote me on that, diets are very unsuccessful. It's like we want to build that structure and the systems and the tools and the frameworks that are going to help us in these transitions. And Soul Hunger is that framework. It is that process. And it really does become a lot easier from there. So anyways, thanks so much for listening. I'm Erin. I am the creator of Soul Hunger. We work together really and truly in a self-authoring and a self-led way, where I hope you get to know your body a bit based on my years of working with a bunch of people, a bunch of clients, and being in the industry for over 10 years and losing, a bunch of weight, but really getting invested in coaching and my own certification and all this kind of stuff. I just am so passionate about thinking outside the box when it comes to health and our body and our body image, and how we manage change and ourselves through that change, because I find that was the only thing that really and truly worked for me, or works for me, and for a lot of my clients, and a lot of the latest research that I see coming out as well. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. And if you have any topics you want me to explore, let me know. But remember, getting grounded in these bigger transitions, or just understanding what you need to feel grounded, that awareness piece is the first step to really finding your own soul, satisfying your own soul, and having that truce with food and exercise. So see you guys soon. Bye.